This is Corporal Anderson along with Officer Achman of the New Ulm Police Department. Just to give you a little background about us too, I've been with the police department for 17 years. Prior to that, I actually worked 14 years in the retail liquor industry as a store manager of a retail liquor store.
And I'm Officer Achman, and I've been with the department for around 6 years, and I am one of the officers that runs the alcohol and tobacco compliance checks for the city.
Normally we would do this class obviously in person, but because of the situation in our world today, we will be doing this via video, and hopefully we'll see how this goes.
Mm-hmm.
So why are we attending the training? To keep our community safe of alcohol-related injuries and deaths, and we'll get into some more statistics later on that, and we also want to keep your businesses and servers protected from criminal penalties and lawsuits. The ways we can accomplish this is to not overserve customers. We don't want to serve already intoxicated customers. We don't want to serve to the level where they're intoxicated. And regardless of the customer's mode of prior transportation, whether they're driving, they're a passenger, they're walking, whatever, we still don't want to get them to the point where they're, they can't take care of themselves because they're too intoxicated. And again, we do not want to sell the intoxicated customers off sale, and we don't want to sell or serve underage customers. The ultimate goal, obviously, as we mentioned earlier, is to increase the awareness of impaired driving issues and to decrease the alcohol-related crashes which cause injuries and deaths. And here's some of the statistics. In 2018, alcohol-related car crashes killed almost 30 people a day. And it's, 30 people a day, or one every 50 minutes. Also in 18, 10,511 deaths from drunk driving crashes. And that's out of 36,560 nationwide that were killed in motor vehicle traffic crashes. So you're looking at about a third of all deaths related to motor vehicle crashes are also related to drunk driving. We're not only saving somebody's life we don't know possibly, but we're also saving the life of our customers. The customers that you have, you want to obviously keep. That's a big part of being in a business. You want to gain customers, you want to keep customers. And the last thing you want to do is have some of your customers killed in crashes because they were overserved. The criminal penalties associated with overserving and sales to underage customers, it is a misdemeanor for somebody that is under 21 to attempt to purchase. Unfortunately, or however you want to look at it, it's a gross misdemeanor for somebody to try or somebody that sells to that person. We've discussed in previous classes how we're not sure how that should be that way. I think, in my own opinion, that it should be the same for both, but it is what it is. So we also have the New Ulm City Code, Chapter 5, which discusses the liquor licensing and regulations.
Yeah, a lot of that chapter just kind of falls in with state code, so that's why I put it under gross misdemeanors. So.
Yep.
And these are we're getting into kind of the civil penalty portion of it. So there's two going to be portions of it, the criminal portion and the civil penalties portion. That previous slide was the criminal. So that's when the government's going to be fining you and possible jail time and stuff like that. Then we get into the civil penalties. So again, local ordinances, they may be more restrictive than what the civil penalties and the state statutes call for. So you're looking up to $2,000 a fine per alcohol violation. You're working on your license suspension, maybe getting it revoked. And again, those are assessed down at the city and county level. And the next slide here I have is just the New Ulm Chapter 5 penalties. So this is a list of things that would violate the Chapter 5 clause, and they're the ones of serving to an underage person or somebody obviously intoxicated, and a few of the other ones here. So this is what we don't want you to get to a point where you're having to actually look through this chapter and figure out what you did wrong. And this I pulled from the city code. This is the minimum penalties. So this is obviously going to apply to the people that are businesses and people that are in New Ulm. But for New Ulm standards, if you're on the regular penalty grid, if you have that first violation, the minimum standard is $500 and a 5-day suspension. If you're on that best practice side of the grid, you're looking at a minimum of $250. So, but again, when you look at this, don't just think, well, that's what it is. These are the minimums that the city council is going to be looking at. They can obviously go for more if they so choose.
The other thing I just want to point out here real quick is this is the penalty for the business. If you as a server working for that business sells to somebody underage, obviously you're subject to the criminal side of it. And if somebody's hurt or killed, you can also be subject to the civil side where you can be sued in civil court. So.
That's a good point, because I know when I do when I've caught businesses or people in town violating any of this stuff, when we do our compliance checks, well, sometimes you get that impression that they think that, well, it's the business that's going to handle all this. It's like they will have to do with the civil side, but I get your personal information because criminally, you're the one that gets charged for serving to the underage or what the violation is.
This is just some out of newspapers around the country. Obviously, a tech student and the bar being sued for wrongful death. So the student worked for the bar, and they apparently sold to somebody that ended up being killed. And so not only did the bar get sued, but the server did as well. Same thing with the roof bar and driver, both dealing with a crash there where there was a lawsuit brought. The one I wanted to point out is the ejected NFL fan found dead. And I'm going to be honest with you, I don't remember which NFL team it was, but apparently the security had kicked this fan out of the stadium, and later on he was found dead in the parking lot. The stadium owner, the team, and the NFL were all sued in that case. So. Yeah. The drunk when dead in the snow after Shakopee store sold him beer. And I'll just read through this quick, but they kind of thought it was a whole joke. Mr. Lowry stumbled into a Shakopee convenience store. He was drunk, dropping his money, falling down at the counter. The clerk still ended up selling him a 6-pack of beer. Nobody called the authorities, and nobody checked to make sure he got home. He was eventually found dead the next morning in a snowbank around the corner from the store. He had beers from the 6-pack in each hand unopened. So obviously this person, the seller, can be charged with selling to somebody that's obviously intoxicated, and the business can also be charged, and they're both civilly liable.
This is what we don't want to see any headlines here in New Ulm with anything like this. This is what the class is for. Again, I will kind of get into the violations for the retail sales. And this is what it says in 348-502. No person may sell, give, furnish, or in any way procure for another alcoholic beverages for the use of an obviously intoxicated person. So that always gets to what does obviously intoxicated mean. And this is kind of the judicial opinion that came down through the courts. It's when exercising reasonable powers of observation, one sees or one should that the buyer is intoxicated. I know there's a ruling from a judge that, if you can, through your observations, indicate why you think this person is intoxicated, they are under your power of you can refuse to sell. If they've kind of forfeited that thing, you are allowed to not sell to them.
And it can be hard. I mean, again, I worked in the business. I know it can be difficult to do this, but you have to. I mean, we had just a couple of quick anecdotes. We had a time where 2 gentlemen actually got out of their vehicle. Luckily they weren't driving, but they got out of the vehicle. They both vomited outside the store and then walked in and thought they were going to buy some more alcohol. Obviously we turned them away. And it can be difficult to do that. Another situation, I had a gentleman walked into our store, and he was so intoxicated that when I told him I couldn't sell to him, he said he was going to go to a different location. Well, the location he told me he was going to was where he was already at. He was so drunk he had no clue even where he was at.
So again, we're looking for that common sense that obviously intoxicated. Like you said, we deal with people all the time that are at quite a high level and maybe they are pretty heavy drinkers and it's hard to tell. But then again, you get the obvious ones that are stumbling around that you know. And the signs of intoxication, I think we kind of all know, you know, some of these. You got the strong odor, obviously you smell that. That slurred speech, the staggering, kind of that redness of the eyes if you're obviously that close to selling and you're not in a dark place like a bar or something. The poor conditions or poor coordination of the hands is probably, I think, a key giveaway with a lot of people when they're trying to hand you that money, the credit card, their ID, whatnot, and they're just, you can just tell they're not handling them properly or they're just staring at those cards really long because they're impaired. And then some of the loud and argumentative, I guess, some of those, if you know this person, obviously if you have that personality change, that might indicate them if they're a regular customer and you can kind of tell. And then the big one is, again, especially for the bar owners, is that number of drinks consumed. I know that can be tough with some of the things, but eventually when we open up again and people are going back to restaurants and bars and sitting in there, I mean, it's kind of on you to make sure you can keep track of the number of drinks. You know, if that person's had X amount of drinks and it's getting a lot of them, might be time to cut them off. And a little humor here, just.
Yeah, not sure if that's quite obvious, but I would hope so, but yeah. You never know. So.
I would hope we make sure this person gets to a comfortable bed. And this gets back to the keep an eye on them. Obviously, if you're in bars or a restaurant or something like that, not so much for off sale, but, you know, kind of pay attention to how much they're drinking and how fast.
So, like I said earlier, it can be kind of tough to refuse a sale. It can be uncomfortable for you. The customer sometimes can get a little irate. And so, you know, some of the ideas that we like to give out or some of the ways that we like to say to handle it is, obviously we can't hesitate to refuse it. You know, the bottom line is it's your job, it's your, you know, your pocketbook that's going to get hit in the long run by selling to somebody you shouldn't. And so you kind of need to think of yourself a little bit in this situation. So, you know, just explain the reasons professionally and tactfully. Just, you know, sir, it appears to me you've had too much to drink, and state law says that I can't sell it to you. Again, that's not always going to be where they're going to like that answer, but you know, you got to do the best you can. So, you know, notify the manager or the supervisor of your decision. In a bar, make sure that all the servers and sellers are aware, and I guess that even works for liquor stores. Make sure that everybody that's working at that time knows, you know, that this person is intoxicated. You've already denied a sale, and you don't want anybody else to sell them. You know, management needs to support the staff in this decision. I mean, if you start having issues between management and employees, it makes it, number one, the customer is going to work that. They're going to play that to their advantage. And number two, the employee is going to start wondering when they really should turn down somebody, and they may decide, you know, the heck with it, I'm not going to turn anybody down because I got in trouble the last time and that kind of stuff. And then we also want you to notify law enforcement. If the customer is resistant, feel free, please, to contact us, and we certainly can come down and handle it.
Yep, I've never had a problem going down to any of the bars or places I've called and helped deal with a customer that's just not liking the answer that they're getting. And then just a caveat to add on to this one, again, nothing we give in this presentation like overrides what your place of employment says or anything. We're just giving you what the laws are and what our stances are on it. But again, just be aware, remember, if you do serve to someone underage or over intoxicated, remember it's coming back on you. The business will have to deal with the civil section, but that criminal section is coming back to you. So that's like he said, you need to work with your manager or supervisor and make sure the business and you are on the same page so that when something does happen or is happening, that everyone's on that same page.
Server sales restrictions, obviously retailers shall refuse to sell any alcoholic beverages to anyone to any person or persons whose character or behavior is questionable. Now, we've had questions about that. You know, well, this person, I don't like them, or they look kind of weird, I'm not going to sell to them. And that's not what this means. What it means is, again, like Andy had said earlier, if you've got a regular customer and now they come in and they aren't acting themselves, or there's a person that comes in that's just really out of it, isn't acting, I guess, like a normal person, if there is such a thing. We want to really question that, and don't be afraid to ask questions of this person to try to ascertain whether or not they're intoxicated. And then also if, their credentials, their IDs in any manner are not satisfactory, and we'll get into what satisfactory IDs are here in a bit.
And again, these are some of the things we've been told, and I know works pretty well. Maybe if someone comes in and is intoxicated and you don't want to give them any more drinks, again, offering that food, that non-alcoholic drink. I know there's local businesses around here that make sure those customers get home by either calling them the taxi or lining up that ride, And again, if this isn't working, that's the time to call law enforcement if it's getting to that point, and that's where we can help assist with that and making sure this person makes some good choices and gets home safely, because that's the ultimate goal here, is to make sure everyone gets home safely. And again, the big one is, time is the only thing that will decrease the effects of alcohol. There is no magic cure. You can't just down a cheeseburger and 10 minutes later it's going to be out of your system. If you had that cheeseburger beforehand, it might have slowed the rate at which you get it, but time's the only thing that's really going to get rid of that alcohol. And again, we're looking to protect yourself and your business. That's what this is kind of all about. Remember, you got to look out for yourself and the business that you're working for by making sure everything is up to legal standards here. So that adult sales only, and then we don't want you to get any criminal or civil penalties, and which is the ultimate goal of preventing injuries and death. And the underage sale of service, again, 348-503, we touched on this a little bit beforehand, but again, it's unlawful for any person to sell, barter, furnish, or give alcoholics to anyone under 21. And also illegal for anyone to lend them their ID or knowingly give them alcohol. I know this gets to my compliance checks. People are like, well, you're sending people underage. There is an exemption for when they're under law enforcement guidance to do the compliance checks. So I don't know if you want to get into the IDs
The unacceptable IDs, obviously if any DL or driver's license or ID is in any kind of disrepair. With our new licenses, it's a little bit different. It's harder to peel back, so to speak. When I first started in the business, when I was in the liquor business, we still had the raised numbers and all that good stuff on the licenses. And those actually were fairly easy to fake and to alter. I think our new licenses are a lot harder to do that, but you still want to make sure there's no disrepair, that there isn't a corner peeled back or something along that lines, or that there's, I know, again, back in the day when I was in the business, they would cut out pictures and try to replace the picture on somebody else's driver's license, that kind of stuff. So it's always stuff to look for like that. You want to be able to recognize that the ID is fraudulent, and we'll get into the ID guide here a little bit later. Underage ID attempting to purchase alcohol, obviously, again, look at the ID closely. Make sure that it's them. Make sure that the birth dates match up on the front and the back and all that good stuff. So again, you don't want it to belong to somebody else. You want to make sure it's belonging to the buyer, and that's what I mean by looking at it. You can have a brother that may look very similar to another brother, but the one brother's of age. You don't want him lending his driver's license or his ID to the younger brother in order to be able to buy stuff. And you are allowed, and we'll get into that a little more again later, but you are allowed to confiscate the IDs. So
I think that's the next slide here, yep.
Okay.
So you can, obviously, if you believe that the ID that you have in front of you is, again, fake, borrowed, underage, there's something not right with it, you may seize it and keep it. That being said, by state statute, you're supposed to call law enforcement in 24 hours. If possible, not too busy, I prefer you call as soon as possible so that we can go down there and get that ID and kind of help you out, verify if that's good or not. And obviously, if the person stays there, that's even better. Obviously, with your business, if you take that ID and they take off running, give us a call. We'll try to do what we can. Up to your business. I would not go and tackle the person or do anything like that. But just give us a call, again, for surely within the 24 hours, but soon as possible, and we'll take that from you and try to decide if it's a good ID or not. And then again, into the compliance checks, this is what, you know, if you see me out about in town doing these, probably where I'll see a lot of people that are watching this class when I'm out doing these. Again, what we're doing is we're checking that off sale, on sale of all the businesses in town that have a liquor license to make sure they are following this, that they're not selling to underage. And again, the really only way to do that is to send someone that is underage into the business and attempt to buy some alcohol. When we do these checks, again, we're not looking to, like it says here, we don't use fake IDs. Now, I'm not sending them in with an altered ID that I sat there and made it look like them and everything's right, because I don't think that's a fair check. What we're trying to do here is just a fair check of if this person is 19, 20 years old, if they went into a liquor store and tried to buy alcohol, would they be able to do that? So again, most businesses are pretty good at this. I think it's getting better, but I will say it seems like every year I do these checks several times and we always seem to get at least one or two every time. So we're going to keep doing them until I guess there's either none or everyone's good with it, but I can see these keep going on and on. And we'll kind of get into the checking IDs here. This is the big one of, this is to help you avoid some of that civil and criminal penalties by checking the IDs.
So acceptable IDs, proof of age for purchasing or consuming alcoholic beverages are established only by one of the following. Valid driver's license or identification card issued by Minnesota, any other state or province of Canada, and it must include the photograph, date of birth of the licensed person, and we'll get into the enhanced DLs and learner's permits later. Valid military identification card issued by the United States Department of Defense. And again, back in the day when I was in the business, we weren't allowed to take those, and Andy and I both served in the military, and so I can tell you when I was in the ID card they gave us was basically just a laminated piece of paper. And so they were super easy to fake at that time, and so we weren't allowed to take them, but we are now, and we'll show you a picture of those here in a bit. But a valid passport issued by the United States, and in the case of a foreign national, a valid passport as well, and then tribal IDs. We do have the Lower Sioux Agency near New Ulm. I don't know that you'll see a ton of tribal IDs, but there again, when I was in the business, we would see a few here and there. So. This is the new Minnesota DL. So as you can see, that's what the very newest incarnation, I guess, of the license looks like. So
definitely harder to fake with the ghost picture kind of in that lower right corner and some other security features kind of built into this one. And the big thing is to note for this one, everything's running horizontal. Minnesota here, I'll go to the next slide here. With the minor IDs, Minnesota joined the other 46 states that do that. For anyone that's under 21, they have a vertical ID. That's to help, again, all you business owners and everybody else kind of do that quick verification. I'll go back a slide just if you didn't catch it. So you got horizontal, and then that minor one is vertical. And then there's also the, if you notice under the picture when they're under 21, it'll either be a red or yellow line as say under 18 or under 21 to help you identify that feature if you weren't aware of these licenses.
The one thing I want to point out on the license is I can see two areas where the date of birth is listed on the front of the license here. You have under the DOB, it says 8/15/1957, and then on the bottom right corner there, it also says 8/15/57. So make sure that they match. And on the back, you know, this is just basically what the back looks like. I know our older licenses had the date of birth listed on the back too. It does not appear that they are doing that anymore, but.
Yeah. Oh, and then just going back a couple slides. The real ID, you'll see that star on the right. It just, again, it just informs you that it's a Minnesota real ID. Obviously that person's just had a little more checks to get their license, but doesn't change anything when it comes to verifying it. And same with the different types of Minnesota headers. If you just look on the top of the licenses, there'll be some different headers. Again, doesn't really matter for alcohol sales what's up here, but it might be an indication, obviously, if they have an instruction permit or or a provisional license, you might want to take a little closer look at their age.
And obviously, these are the previous incarnation of the license, and there are some still out there, so we just wanted to show them to you. Again, on these, however, it does show the date of birth on the front, and then on the back, I think we get to that here in a bit, there's also a date of birth on the back, so make sure that they match up. Again, the under 21 has a header that says under 21. They also will have a header on some of them that say under 18 for the tobacco sales end of it. The one on the left, upper left, is the normal license, and then obviously the one below is a identification card. So. And then again, we used to have, and I think they still do, but you have the enhanced license, and again, basically all that means is that they had to provide more proof of who they were in order to get that. I know you can get into Canada with the enhanced driver's license, however you can't fly with that. So.
And there's the backs.
And again, the backs, the enhanced license is a little bit different than the normal. I do want to point out now where the arrow on the enhanced, so that the top one is the enhanced, where that arrow is the date of birth. So if you look at that, you should be able to see their date of birth. Again, we want to make sure that matches with the front.
Yeah, you'll be seeing, again, we're going to the new IDs, obviously the state's pushing those, but these enhanced and other older IDs are going to be around for a few more years until people kind of phase out of them or have to replace them. So.
And again, this is just comparing the enhanced versus the regular. The enhanced is a little shinier, and then it does have the flag, which it showed earlier. And then again on the back, it just shows you the difference between the two. So. And this is just the instruction permit. Looks pretty close to the other one, other than it's a little lighter colored and says instruction permit. And then it'll list different things on the back. But again, it still has the date of birth on the front and back. So.
Those are most of the Minnesota ones you'll probably see, and now getting into Canada.
Yeah, the Canadian ones, some of these can be a little difficult, especially like I think Quebec area, the French-speaking areas more so. Some of the licenses will be in French, and it can be hard to read them, but it can be done. You can generally figure out the date of birth and that kind of stuff, but like I say, some of them can be in French. So.
And then again, this is great. If you get one of these and you're not comfortable with where you're going to spend that extra time making sure it's them, and then again, depending if you want to be tactful or not, you can ask if they maybe have a different ID or something you can help verify that one off of to cover yourself. Getting into this is what the military IDs look like when I had them. Pretty standard right now. They're all still getting issued. Just depends on the branch that you're serving in. Anything else with those?
Yeah, like I said, these are actually a hard card. I'm quite a bit older than Andy, and so when I served in the military, like I said, they were just simply a laminated piece of paper, basically, which was very hard, very easy to alter if you wished.
And I got to remember, this only has the front of it. I do believe that I have to check again. I think the back has the date of birth on it for you to help verify that, but I'm not 100% sure on that anymore. It's been a while since I've had mine. But yeah, they're a hard card. Just again, I would spend just a little extra time verifying, because if they have this card, they should have, I'm hoping, another ID with them as well, but maybe they only brought this one for some reason.
And the passport, again, this is the passport book and the passport card. Either one of them is acceptable as proof of age. So. And just a Canadian passport, again, still acceptable. And I believe we have the Mexican, Mexican next. Same thing. I mean, it's a passport. It's acceptable.
And then get into the tribal IDs here.
The tribal IDs, this is, I don't believe this is all of them in the state, but it's a good chunk of them. Again, you're probably not going to see a lot of these. If you do, I'm guessing it's going to be the lower Sioux ones, which I believe are on the lower right corner there. You know, I used to work up in Wilmer in the liquor store up there, and then we saw, you know, the lower Sioux, we saw some upper Sioux. I seen some from the Mille Lacs band of Ojibwe. I mean, but again, it's not like you're going to see these every day. It's going to be few and far between.
So that's probably the list of probably the most common ones you're obviously going to see with and deal with around here. We did check a lot of the alcohol distributors do provide a ID book. You know, these are a little older, 2010, 2012. I do know they make newer ones, but these books contain basically all the IDs of all the states and a lot of those other odd ones that you deal with, and they kind of go what they should look like and everything that to help you make sure that, yes, this is a real ID, because I don't deal with it very often.
And here, I always tell this story, so I apologize if you've been through this class before and heard the story, but it's just a story of how I used this once. We had a young man that walked into our store one day and presented me with supposedly a Utah driver's license. I looked at it, and my first clue that this was not a real Utah driver's license was the fact that the picture he had decided to use for his fake ID actually had a picture of him sitting in his recliner at his house. So that was my first clue. But I did pull out the ID book, the ID checking guide, and I opened it up to Utah, and at about that time his eyes were about ready to bug right out of his head. So obviously it didn't match. I told him it didn't match, and I sent him on his way. So.
So again, if this is something you think your business or you would need, maybe reach out to one of those distributors or something and get a hold of a guide if you think that would be something to help you along. And we'll get into the plan to check IDs. Again, the photo match, the big thing is make sure that photo matches. Again, I see it all the time. You know, that person picks up the ID and just hands it right back. There's no way they even really looked at it. It was just that motion of pick up the ID and then just hand it back. So to actually take that time, that little bit to be like, yep, photo matches, yep, legal age to buy, this is an acceptable ID, it feels right, it looks right, there's nothing odd about it, and again, that appearance and condition is where it needs to be, and then it's not an expired card.
With the expired cards, I don't know if they still issue it, but they used to have the yellow, what we called the yellow paperwork when you renewed your driver's license. And if your card was expired, but you had renewed it, but you didn't have the new one yet, you had that yellow paperwork, and you do need to have both. So you still need the driver's license plus the yellow paperwork. The driver's license without the yellow paperwork is not valid. You cannot accept that as valid ID. And I believe now they kind of went to like a printout of your record or whatever, that it's just a white piece of paper that has your information on it plus a picture. So we, in checking, that is valid. However, we kind of encourage you to really look at it closely because it can be altered or faked pretty easily. So.
And again, the old method on the right there is we'd clip the corner, and that is still being done occasionally. The ideal method is on the left there, the new method, and it might be hard to see here, but through their picture and stuff, what's stamped is the word void. So this is where, I know if you go to the DMV, your card will get stamped void, and that's where you'll get that, I think it's white now, again, it used to be yellow, that white paperwork, and they wrap it around your card. But just be aware, you will see both, because again, not every single place has that machine to stamp void in, so some places are still...
Right. As law enforcement, we're most likely going to still be clipping the corners because we don't have that machine to stamp the void on it. So, and again, just to reiterate, both of these without any other paperwork are not legal to take for ID for alcohol purposes. So if they have these plus the white paper now, I guess, then it's acceptable. But otherwise, alone, they are not acceptable. And this is the yellow form we were talking about earlier, at least.
Yep.
And like I say, I don't know that they're doing this anymore, but this is what that form looked like.
Future presentations, I'll try to get a hold of the DMV and get what they're currently doing, but I think they're still trying to figure everything out too with their new system and stuff as well.
Minnesota driver's license will always have a full face picture. They can wear a hat, you can wear a hijab, whatever you want to wear as far as headgear. However, your full face has to be shown. And so if you do get a license where the full face is not shown, obviously it's not a true Minnesota driver's license.
And then sometimes you'll see, if you guys look closely in the back of the card, it'll say something like any use of alcohol or drugs invalidates the license. That is for us as law enforcement. That doesn't prevent you from serving to them if they are of age and for all of the reasons can buy it. That is for us, that if we come across this person and they have alcohol in their system, we send a letter in to the state and that revokes their license, just them having it. So they've had some other issues with alcohol in the past. So I know that question's come up of, you know, will you get in trouble if you serve to them? You will not, but that person themselves will get in trouble for having the alcohol. But again, just even if you do see this though, just make sure everything else is good, the license is valid and they're not intoxicated, and again, there's no reason that you shouldn't serve to them.
So we want to serve smart, obviously. We want to refuse to serve to intoxicated customers. We want to refuse to serve to underage customers. If you're a bar or a liquor store and you know they're intoxicated the minute they get to the door, don't even let them in the business. Just explain to them like we said earlier, I'm sorry, but it's state law, I can't serve you anyway, so there's really no point of you being in here. And we don't want to have impaired customers leaving and driving. Obviously, if, in town here we do have the program where the bars are giving some rides homes and we're not ticketing vehicles when they're left downtown, and so don't be afraid to do that or to call them a cab or whatever, but just, if they are intent on driving and they're intoxicated, please call us. Hopefully we can stop them before they even get into the car. That way they're not in trouble, they're not going to get arrested. Hopefully they're at a point where we can maybe just give them a ride home or something like that. But again, we want to do our part to keep the roads safe and along with our community. And as law enforcement or as a police department, we need your help to do that. I mean, we can't do it all by ourselves. No. So.
Yeah, that's again partially why I do the compliance checks, because is to just make sure everyone's still being honest and still doing that part, making sure they're doing what they have to keep, specifically for the underage checks, that underage portion of it. I know that, that's not everything there is to it, but I know I do, just to caveat back before I get asked, well, if they don't have ID and I know they're of age, can I still sell them? Yes, you're taking that chance as the private person. If they don't have any identification and you believe they're over 21, you sell them and they're over 21 and they're not overly obviously intoxicated, that is not a crime in and of itself. You're just taking that chance. That's why we push this IDs so hard, because that's what covers you saying, I checked, everything looked good to me, this is why I served them. Yeah,
in that situation, if for some reason later we find out they're not of age and you sold to them, you are still open to the criminal and civil penalties. But if you're 100% positive and like Andy said, you feel comfortable with that sale, then that's up to you. So.
And I think that's all
and this is just our contact information. If you have any questions, again, not being in a classroom setting where you're actually here and we're in front of you, we do generally tend to get some questions at the end of our presentation here. And so since we're going this route, if you do have any questions, please feel free to either call the police department and they'll get a hold of one of us, or as you can see, our emails are there. By all means, please send us an email with your question and we'll respond as soon as we can.
Yep.
And that should do it for our class. Hopefully this works out well. Again, it's hard to know without seeing how it all ended up here, but we hope it went well, and we hope that somehow you got some, or that you got some information that will help you with your job.